So, a while back, Akon said this.
We a little different when it comes to stage presence. Now in
yeah.
America, oh yeah, them niggas gonna be wobbling, pants hanging half down, bored as hell, half asleep because they high as hell on stage.
Yeah.
But Africa, we wake up morning like, look at these YouTube clips of all these kids from Uganda and how they be, you know what I'm saying? Like these kids are performers. Like so, for us, it comes natural.
Immediately these remarks were published, everybody was up in arms asking him, how dare you? How dare you come to our country, build off and become successful off the love and the support of America and Americans and American music and culture, and then turn back around and say what? And say Black Americans are lazy as compared to Africans. They're not as aggressive. They're not taking advantage of every opportunity that they get. Well, I want to give you sort of an African perspective of how Africans sort of perceive Black Americans, and consume this with caution because the only place we get to see Black Americans is in movies written by white people, directed by white people, because unfortunately for a long time Black people did not have media, and so the representation of Black Americans to Africans has always been skewed. Hi guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing great. My name is Ndiro Ganga. I'm back again for another chat. I hope that you're well. If you would like to get to know me better, head over to my channel Art on Ndiro Ganga, where I make videos on diaspora relocation back to the continent, the highs, the lows, and what it takes to move back to Africa if you're interested in retracing your roots and coming back to the motherland. Now today I want to address the controversial video of Akon because I feel like it's been talked a lot about, but in an American context. I want to put it into context as an African. Well, first of all, I do not support those statements. I think that different people, Africans have their own unique set of challenges, and also Black Americans have their own unique set of challenges. It's a double-edged sword. For example, while Black Americans are struggling in America, Africans are dying to come to America and try and make a living for themselves. And some of them that come there are able to build up for themselves. And so that is why when Black Americans are sort of struggling, Africans will be like, what are you talking about? That's the land of opportunities. If you can get a job, if you can then Africans cannot seem to understand what you're talking about, right? Because their problem is not your problem. Their problem is they're just looking for opportunities. It doesn't matter the nature of the opportunity, the quality of the opportunity. They will wash toilets, scrub bathrooms, work in care homes, deliver groceries, live in the Bronx, whatever it takes to make $1 or $2, send back home and ensure that their family is comfortable and they can build something for themselves at the end of the day. Then Black Americans, you've been in this country for a long time, and I am just making assumptions here because I've never lived as a Black American. You came to a place where your identity is always being questioned by outsiders, by yourself. You're treated like the other, you know, in terms of opportunities, in terms of pay, in terms of how you relate with government and law enforcement. And so this is a very unique set of challenges that an African who's coming to America cannot understand. And most of the time, if you cannot understand something, it's very difficult to sympathize with it. Now, when we were growing up, we watched a lot of movies. Guess how Black Americans were portrayed in movies? You're the lazy people, you were the crackheads, you were the drug dealers, you were the guys in baggy jeans riding children bicycles, you were the gangs and gang leaders, you were the absentee dad, you were the drug addict married to a white woman who's trying to put the house in order, you were the guys that were perpetuating gang violence and smoking weed and you understand, robberies. That's how Black people have been cursed in movies all along. White people are always like superheroes and saviors and very straightforward people. It's a deliberate thing, but that's how we have got. Before BT and MTV, there was a lot about Black people that we did not know. Does that make sense? And even the way news and coverage is always done, when something happens, the way Fox is going to cover it is not the same way as a Black-owned media house by Black people is going to cover it. Does that make sense? And so the representation of Black Americans to Africa has always been very skewed. There was a time I had a conversation with an entrepreneur who is currently in Ghana but was living in America, and he said, when Africans come to America, they're scared of us. I said, why? He said, Africans go to live in white people neighborhood, those who can't, like, they can't wait to get out of the hood, and they don't want anything to do with Black people, or rather Black Americans, because of everything that they've been told or they've seen on the media. We do not understand how the last 400 years the system has worked deliberately to hold back Black people. I have a cousin of mine. She and her mom moved to America a long time ago. She's the only person in our extended family that's in America. That should just tell you how Kenyans perceive like leaving the country. And I remember asking her, I was really young, I think I was 16 or 15 when they came to visit. I said, oh, do you have like Black friends? And she said, I think she was in Atlanta for school or something. She said, it's hard to relate with Black Americans because they want you to be like them. No job, no house, no nothing, no future. I was too young to comprehend it, and I just remembered it when I was recording this video. And for her, as an African coming to America, she's coming to the land of opportunities, and she will do whatever it takes, right? But for people who've lived there and have been systematically held back by the system, you can understand how it looks, how it feels. And so when you see that there are certain Black people that are not necessarily doing well, it's not because they're lazy or they don't want to put in work. It's just you've not walked a mile in the issue, you know. I also interviewed another lady who said every time they come here, she's Black like me, like she's not even mixed race, like she's black. If she doesn't open her mouth to speak, you wouldn't know that she's American. When she did her ancestry test, most of her DNA is from Nigeria. So literally she's African, and her parents just moved to America to try and give her a better life. But she says when she comes here, she's judged as an American, and people are trying to rip off all the small money that she has. And she was like, people have this assumption that Americans have money, and it's true, and there's certain Americans that have money, but Black people as a community have the least amount of money. Then I was interviewing Kev Boy, who told me something very interesting. He said, why is it that when Black people excel in America, it's such a big deal? Because these are like unicorns. It's now beginning to happen for them. And that should tell you for how many years they were systematically held back. And he also said something. Look at the places where Black people excel, Black Americans, that is sports and entertainment, because this is just like pure talent. When politics come into play and strategy, and then white supremacy kicks in, and it's everywhere. And so it's really, for us, now we're beginning to educate ourselves and have sort of a rough idea of what goes on. You know, up until George Floyd, many Africans, and I can say this with such a strong conviction, did not know how dire racism was in America. I think the first time that I got exposed to racism in America was in 2016. I was doing my internship, and there was a person who was shot in the chest by the police in the streets. Yet the police had already restrained him. He was already on the ground, and I couldn't watch it twice. I was just like, how can you do this? I didn't understand what had happened. I was also really young. I think I was 20, 21. And then I just never thought about it until George Floyd. And you might have thought that it will stop at George Floyd. It didn't. It keeps happening. Can you imagine? I interviewed somebody who said hearing shots is normal. His brother was killed by the police. Can you imagine the burden that these people have to bear? And so this video is not to excuse ignorance, right? But it is to sort of put into context why some things are always said the way they said. And there's no excuse, because what you perceived is not necessarily reality. If white movies are showing you this right now, there are people like, they're black entertainers who are writing scripts that reflect truly the reality of Black Americans in America. in philosophy, we are taught by Dr. Olekamau, of course, you can't know hot without knowing cold. Black Americans might be all that you say and some more, but that's the cold part. What's the hot part? Even a coin has two sides. Okay, we hear all these negative things about Black Americans. They could be true. Okay, but then tell me the positives. Tell me the good things about them. You know, you cannot discredit the value that the Black American community has had in America. If we're just being honest, the country was built off their blood, sweat, and tears. You know, they continue to hold fort in some of the most critical sectors, such as healthcare. You know, and in as much as the West is beginning to take in more people, nurses, doctors from all over, these careers that Black people have held, like they've worked so hard to get in. Like, you cannot discredit the amount of effort that Black people are consistently putting in terms of even legislation and putting the right people in office, in terms of championing for themselves. You know, the other day I was watching, I don't know, I think maybe it is BT, and just the way that they were talking about all the things that Black Americans have had to endure to get to where they are, then you begin to start respecting their struggle. And so Black Americans might not perceive things the way Africans perceive, but there's a story behind why they do things the way they do. Does that make sense? Black Americans do not want to scrub toilets anymore because they've done that for the last 400 years. They've been at the bottom of the food chain, and they're asking, can you let us in? They're asking, they want their kids to go to better school, better healthcare, you know, better nutrition, better representation. All these issues build up and hold them back in very unique but detrimental ways that we as Africans going in cannot relate. Because for you, when you're going in, it's not about the bigger picture. For you, it's just, how can I make a living? How can I make a decent living? How can I be able to make enough money to build a house back home and start a business, and then that's it? These guys, they don't have another home to go back to. You can go back to Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. You can go back to Ghana. That's their home. And so it's almost unfair. It's not almost unfair. It is unfair to judge people whose struggle you have no idea or no context about. You could be living in the same country as them, but that's your first year, you're the first generation in that country, and how you will experience that country is very different from how the people that have been born there, bred there, and have lived as second-class citizens will experience it, you know. For us, we don't mind. You can work so many jobs and go to school and do whatever it takes to succeed. And there's certain Black Americans that are doing that, but just to discredit them when you've not walked a mile in their shoe, I feel like that's really unfair. And I feel like everything that he got, he deserved, because there's no single, you left your own country, right? Because it was so hard for you to make it there. So imagine it was hard for you to make it in your own country, that you had to leave and go to another person's country. So why are you judging them when they're struggling in their country? Why are you judging them when they're trying to find their way, build back up, you know? I'm just saying that as Africans, let's be a little bit lenient, because it doesn't matter what we go through as Africans abroad. We will never know what it is like to be a Black American in America. We will never know. We can experience similar sets of challenges, because to races, a Black person is a Black person, but the magnitude and the way we experience these challenges and our perception and our way out of it is very different. I don't know. I've been going on and on and on and on and on. Let me know if I've said anything that resonates with you. Let me know if you do not agree with me, if you disagree with something. I'm always open to having these conversations, because at the end of the day, we're learning. Ever since I began talking to people, I've learned a lot. I have really learned a lot. You know, social media has also helped us in like opening the world and showing us what we think and what we perceive, and reality is very, 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 very different. So I mean, I just wanted to put it into context why Africans might perceive Black Americans in a certain type of way, but that is not necessarily the reality, and it's not an excuse for saying that on air. But then again, it's also very important to know that Black Americans, and I've had this so many times from people, say Africans do not like them. That's a video for another day. But for the records, we have no problem with you guys. Personally, I know so many Black Americans that I do not have a problem with. But until we rectify that part of history and acknowledge that this happened, and it happened out of greed, some people sold their people, it happened because the white people overpowered some colonies and just took people, then the journey of healing will begin. But I've heard it so many times, people saying, oh, they don't even like us, why do you go there? I do not necessarily think that's accurate, because it's always based on history. And I think moving forward, Africans are beginning to recognize that you guys are just like us, you're people, you came from us, you know. We might see things differently, but it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, to the Western world, we are all Black, you know, we're all Black. I have deviated from this video. We'll do another video just dissecting that. I'll see you again next time, guys.